I want to show you probably one of the best airplanes ever made. This is a Cessna 182. This is a 1973 model with an unheard of 1,400 hours total time.
My mentor Dennis helped put a lot of love into restoring this thing, including a top-notch panel upgrade.
This airplane had literally 4 annuals where it never flew. If you look in the logbook, it's an annual, then another annual, then another annual, then another annual. So it was a neglected airplane, basically.
And I wanted to show you the airplane, take you for a flight in it, and recreate something that we did in one of the school planes and show you how a higher level of automation changes everything about how you do IFR flying.
So how much have we touched this airplane since after we took off?
Yeah, not much. Yeah, I mean, damn.
The nice thing about a 182 is it's statistically the safest airplane ever built.
I've been working with you for years, doing above and beyond training outside the syllabus of what a school typically offers, so we're not like stepping on Spectrum's toes here.
No, not at all. And most flight schools have to focus on their core business, fleet commonality, which Spectrum doesn't have much of, but that's part of what makes us interesting. We have a Spectrum.
Honestly, that's what got me here.
Yeah.
At the time when I was switching over from where I was flying before, I only had access to a 172R.
Yeah.
Came here, you got the 172S, the 172R, the Super Cub, you had a PA-20 with constant speed prop, and the twin.
Yeah, it's nice having the variety, but over and above that, there's 130 hangars on this field and all kinds of private owners that need training in their own aircraft, whether it's for insurance checkouts or getting ready for their IFR rides and things like that. I've not broken away from Spectrum, but I have my own sideline business, which is Next Level Flight Training, and I provide out-of-the-box kind of training for other people, whether they want to do tailwheel, because Spectrum doesn't do that anymore.
I did my tailwheel checkout with Dennis back in 2014, and it basically changed everything about what I thought I knew about flying.
Or just getting familiarized with an airplane that they just bought, because a lot of times people shy away from flying because they're really worried, as they should be if they don't have the experience. So I help them to get the most out of their airplanes, basically.
So yeah, Dennis is an early Flight Chops mentor. He's been there since the start, and he helped me really figure out what Flight Chops was going to become, and I learned a lot of awesome flying from him. He asked me to plug the shop that helped get this airplane upgraded. This is by no means a paid promotion, but when Dennis asks me for something, he gets it.
The piggy bank is empty.
So upholstery is on the list?
The upholstery is later on the list. I mean, it's still in really good shape for stuff that's 45 years old. But, oh my God, the color. It's just like, it's not a color found in nature, that's for sure. This airplane has capabilities that exceed some commercial jets that big airlines have, and obviously at a fraction of the cost, but it still is a little bit expensive. But thanks to the guys at MI6, the cost was kept reasonable. It's really enhanced the value and the utility of the airplane.
Clear. Part of the inspiration to fly this mission tonight was because my schedule just wasn't lining up with the school airplane that I was training in.
And this one actually, the autopilot in this one actually does a reasonably good job of holding a heading. It is a single axis autopilot.
Yeah, I figure since I'm under the hood, I might as well hand fly it all today. Does that make sense?
Sure. It also has electric trim, so enjoy it.
But this is what I need to get ready to fly my flight test in. Significantly different than what we're flying today.
So that does its own thing, so you don't have to worry about setting your...
You should still confirm that the 650 is talking to the G5. So we've got the lateral CDI is half left, as it shows there. The vertical CDI is half up, which is your glide slope. The two firm indicator should be on 2. The OBS should be showing 150. And now we know that the two units are talking to each other. See down here the 660. This one we use primarily for map. It's got safe taxi, it's got XM weather on it. So this is a great little situational awareness tool, and it's also some redundancy because this is a completely self-contained. It's got its own antenna, own battery. The ship's power is completely lost. You are not,
right,
because it continues to work. Up here, flight plan. So a lot of this you'll see similarities to the 430, right? It knows we're at Burlington, so it's already there. We're going to add a waypoint, in this case Hamilton Airport. And all this you could have uploaded actually from your
iPad.
ForeFlight and your iPad, which is kind of cool.
And the iPad is about the only familiarity between these two flights.
Let's give you a clearance, so if you're ready to copy. But this is one of those places, I admire that you want to hand fly, but this is the part where unless you can kind of keep divvying up your scan,
Use it.
this is a perfect opportunity to use an autopilot, at least in heading mode, right?
So it's going to be pretty interesting to refly this flight with all the automation.
And what we're going to do is we're going to try and fly the same flight, but we're going to preload everything or as much in advance as possible, and we're going to make the automation fly the entire, virtually everything from the exception of the takeoff to the touchdown. And I'll walk you through it as best as I can, and you'll see that by simply monitoring the equipment and monitoring the flight conditions, that frees up your mental energy to do approach briefings and maybe even absorb a little bit more of the lesson because you're not having helmet fire trying to do all the work yourself.
All right, yeah, so that's the track log from whatever lesson that was. So we're going to kind of try to replicate that flight except for using all these tools.
Yeah, there's not a huge difference in the procedure of how this works. The nice thing about Garmin is that their buttonology or philosophy is the same whether it's a 430 or a G1000 or in this case a GTN 650. You still have to put in a flight plan, you still have to load a procedure, but when it's coupled with the autopilot, and if you know how to run the GTN 650, and I'm not an expert, I'm still learning this stuff because it's new to me. My downfall is that I'm flying 15 different kinds of airplanes with 15 different kinds of avionics suites in them, so I'm trying to learn, and I do, but I'm by no means an expert at it, like somebody like Osama, for instance, who spends every hour in one airplane all the time.
And I'm really lucky to have Osama as a mentor. He flies a TBM 850 and a Phenom 300. There's several episodes flying both those airplanes if you haven't seen them. All right, so give me this theory. So the issue is, because I thought about that too, you usually see autopilots up high, but...
Well, on a commercial airliner, they're in the what they call the eyebrow of the glare shield.
Dennis worked on the design of this panel upgrade with a buddy of his that flies a Dash 8, and he explained what he saw when he flew with him one time.
I saw two things. One is I saw that as soon as the wheels are up, it's autopilot on, it's declared autopilot on, and from then on everything is controlled with the autoflight. The other is that their systems are actually more primitive than this. This has way more capability and intuitiveness. Mind you, the Q400 came out, you know, in late 90s, so, and they haven't really done a whole lot to upgrade it since then. And in the commercial world that he flies in, the auto flight's right at the very top. And I said, well, the problem with putting it at the very top is, now imagine that you're up here using the autopilot. What's your hand covering?
Hey, you're covering what you need to see.
I'm covering what I need to see.
Yeah.
So he said, oh, I never thought of that. Because in their world, all the stuff that you need to see is down here or on those big PFDs in the middle of their screen.
So there's your flight plan.
Right.
It's basically in there. Now we can also load the approach in, but in real life you don't load the approach before you take off.
But we would maybe load the departure.
You can load the departure, sure. So we can go to Burlington and we can load a procedure, in this case a departure. And the departure that we would use based on the direction that we're going would be the PEMVA 5, and we're going to use runway 32. And
Durlo, I thought was what we used before.
yeah, Durlo is the most common.
Right.
So there it is, we've loaded it. Now it's part of the flight plan menu, and you can see it here as you scroll through it. There's all the various waypoints with Hamilton, the destination at the end. Couldn't be easier.
In the event that you have a trim runaway, you can interrupt it by pushing the red button, pulling the circuit breaker, obviously shutting off the avionics. But yeah, just it's important that whenever you have a robot running your airplane, that you need to know how to shut the robot off.
That's got some good power,
Oh
right?
yeah, she's got a lot of punch.
Okay, so airspeed's alive. Pressures and temperatures are looking good here. Let's rotate now-ish.
Yeah.
Felt it go. I didn't know what the speed needed to be, but no.
Well, it's got a stall kit on it, so the speeds we weren't allowed to recalibrate. We had to stick with the book speeds, but... Okay, so now you're gonna raise the flaps and simultaneously hit a bit of nose up trim.
That was up trim, yeah, okay.
Perfect. Keep the bars nested. Your power settings are all here now. Bring the power back to 25 inches. All right, so our heading is synchronized with our direction. So I'm gonna just turn the autopilot on. So guess what? Now you can let go. Because it's basically gonna climb in this attitude now. Whatever attitude it was set in is what it's gonna climb to. We haven't given it an altitude.
So is it climbing by speed or by
Climb by pitch attitude right now.
Can you tell it to climb at a speed?
I sure can. I can put it into indicated airspeed, and now I can roll this up or down, and you'll see in the top left window, if I wanted to climb at 100, then I just set it to 100.
Yeah, that's what we want, okay.
And that's what it climbs to, but where is it going to level out at?
Well, we haven't told it to yet.
Right, so hit the right button there, and you'll see a window pop open and set it to 2400.
We are departing runway 32 for the circuit.
Okay, so ALTS is active, or armed rather, and the indicated airspeed is set at 100 for climb.
All right, and then you want to brief what we're doing? Are we heading for a hold, or?
So what I want you to do, because I'd like to talk you through most of it, okay? Right now, push the heading button on the autopilot. So now it's going to follow the heading button. You see how it's starting to turn right a little bit? Yeah. Turn it left with that button there. Turn it to about a 240 heading.
I think that when people spend money on their airplanes, they do it with good intent. They want to get to, you know, all kinds of additional capability. But a IFR pilot that was trained with steam gauges and then expecting that buying a bunch more stuff was going to give them a bunch more capabilities in for a bit of a surprise.
And there we go. We're in cruise. You'll see the speed start to build up.
So now that it leveled off, it knew to ignore that and head to that?
Right.
All right, so we want power back for...
Yeah, let's bring power back to about 23 inches. And then bring the prop back to about 2300 RPM. That's nice and quiet. And again, it just has to be approximate. Oh, look at that. Nailed it.
That's
nicely done.
All right, then I guess we will clarify that, yes, I'm sitting in the left seat of an airplane with a camera in my hand because you're PIC, I'm a filmmaker.
I'm PIC. Actually, it's AOC, autopilot in command.
Well,
but we can't afford to do it all at once, so we tackled the most expensive thing and the most useful thing first, and that was the avionics. MI6 put their best guys on it. Their workmanship is really good. Unfortunately, it took a lot longer than we thought. I don't know if you want to include that.
I mean, that's a real problem. That's the real situation, right? Everyone has to factor that in.
Absolutely. You don't know what you're getting into until you start taking old stuff apart. And unfortunately, some of the previous workmanship that was done on there was very subpar, and a good thing they caught it, and they told us that some of those things had to be redone before they could even start working. So we're grateful that we found that out now, not flying along in the clouds and then all of a sudden a wisp of smoke comes out from the back of the instrument panel and stuff like that. So no, we don't want that.
And now load approach and activate.
that one?
Yep. And that's our active waypoint now. It's in magenta, so push nav on the autopilot. And guess where it's gonna go. And now we want to gain some altitude, so set the altitude pre-select to 3000 on the autopilot. And now we want to tell it how we want to get there. Do you want to get up there using vertical speed or indicated airspeed?
Always indicated, right?
Yep.
Climb.
And now there's a trim kind of a button here. You're going to roll that this way, like a trim wheel, until you pick the speed you want to climb at.
Thank you for describing it as a trim wheel. I've always wondered.
Well, because it replicates exactly what a trim wheel would do.
Now that makes sense.
Raises the nose
but
up.
I'm dialing a number, so that always intuitively got that wrong whenever I adjusted it.
All right, and then for this particular flight, we didn't do a hold, but just to show the functionality of it, we'll add one.
Yeah. We'll do a hold at a typical location. It's usually when you approach one of the bed posts for the GPS approach. Maybe they've got another airplane coming in on another runway, so they're going to put us into a hold. Probably at this particular point, it's called LeavX. We're going to hold at LeavX on the course between LeavX and the initial approach fix. And again, we'll just program that into the GTN 650. I'll show you its functionality. You can select distance-based or time-based holds, and all you got to do is program it in and sit back and watch the show.
You ready to program a hold in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Or should I shoot it? I should probably shoot
Well,
it.
I probably shoot it. So I want to program in a hold at 11. So I'm going to push Levex, and I'd like to hold at that waypoint. And I'd like to hold inbound, so I'm gonna push course 150, enter. Right turns are standard, so that's the default. If they gave me an expect further clearance time, I could put it in there and it'll go ding ding when the time's up or my french fries are done. And instead of a time based, I want to do a distance based, and I want to hold 3 mile legs. And now I'm going to load the hold, and there it is.
So if we go to the map view, is it going to show it to us?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, damn.
So how much have we touched this airplane since after we took off? Right?
Yeah, not much. All right, we are doing the RNAV Zulu 06.
Yeah.
And that to the map. All right, so yeah, so we're heading toward Levex. So if I had to guess, it would be a direct entry.
That's a good guess.
But it don't matter because that thing is going to do it for me.
It's going to figure it out. Even if it was the most awkward hold entry in the world, if you hit the fix at a 90-degree angle, which is still a direct entry, but you shouldn't start turning right away because you're going to be too tight, it'll actually pause and let you offset enough so that when it does start to turn, then when you turn back inbound, the hold is perfectly spaced. In fact, that's very close to what we're going to be doing here. It's almost a perpendicular entry.
Right.
And it'll enunciate here what it's going to do. It'll say hold direct.
The original owner was a priest. I got the logbook showing him picking up the airplane from Wichita, Kansas back in 1973. Then it basically sat for years and years. It's essentially a barn find. It was covered in dust, the windows had hazed over, the paint looked like crap, and we managed to polish all that stuff out. This is the original windshield in this airplane.
Yeah, and for an old airplane, I mean, this capability only comes from having this sort of an integrated system in it. And a lot of times people used to update their airplanes by adding a new this, and then a couple of years later they would add a new that. And the challenge is getting it to all talk, because nowadays everything's digital, so you can't even use we had an autopilot in this. We had 3 servos that we had to rip out. If you know anybody that wants to buy them, let me know. But you can't, the challenge was trying to make everything talk to each other, and it used to drive avionics shops nuts when the digital era took over, because digital and analog, it just doesn't work. The G5 is actually required to drive the autopilot. You couldn't install this without installing that. So if we left the old legacy attitude indicator in it, this would not be possible. And that's why the price crept, right? Because now you got to buy 3 servos. Of course, the new servos don't mount onto the brackets that the old servos were attached to. Got rid of a bunch of old wiring.
Did you lose any weight when you did all this switch?
I lost almost 20 pounds of heavy servos and wiring and gyros and vacuum pumps. See, there, look at that. It says hold direct.
So it knew, yeah, so it got the entry.
Yeah. Clear, right? Yeah.
Normally I try to keep the videos under 20 minutes, but I sent this rough cut to Patreon supporters and they convinced me to keep it long because it really is pretty solid.
All right, and then I guess we would reef a plate.
Yeah, it's perfect time.
Not busy. Yeah, it is kind of luxurious.
Isn't it? I mean, you still want to keep an eye on it, right? It's like running a daycare center, and most of the kids are good, but one of them really likes to pick up power tools. So we just check it every once in a while. Is it doing what it's supposed to do? Yes, it is. Okay, now you can divert your attention to briefing your plane. Anyways, you'll notice that we're now inbound. You'll see that it's in suspension. In other words, sequencing is suspended because we're in a hold. When we're ready to do the approach, then we're going to go and activate the approach, either by unsuspending it or activating the approach. But it's in suspension. We've pushed pause on the process.
And for the overshoot, that's the same thing, where we want to suspend.
Right, when it gets to the missed approach point, it'll suspend because it thinks you're going to land. It also doesn't want to necessarily automatically go into the published missed approach procedure, because ATC might have given you a specific missed approach procedure which you would rather follow, in which case you would leave the unit in suspension and just fly whatever heading and altitude they gave you.
So if you're not in that situation where it's like, oh no, I'm at minimums, don't see it, don't like it, I'm going around, I got to unsuspend this, and it's going to be like, okay, there's the published missed.
Right.
And then the flight director will tell you, well,
gives you all the guides, the flight director, the autopilot. If you unsuspend it, then it kicks the autopilot off, so you can manually kind of reset the airplane, and you would hit toga, so you see a nice pitch attitude for the climb, and then you just re-engage the autopilot by turning it on and pushing nav, and it'll follow the whole missed approach procedure too.
So the procedure would be toga, suspend, or unsuspend.
Power.
Well, yeah.
Power, toga, raise flaps once you have a positive rate of climb, and then unsuspend the unit.
Yeah, so aviate.
And then hit the autopilot, put it back into nav mode. So it's a little bit of a sequence.
But in the aviate, navigate, communicate world, it's like aviate, do everything you're doing, and you can easily hit toga just while you're doing that.
Yep.
Boom, that's done. And then once we like this setup, navigate, unsuspend it, and then communicate. I'm in the overshoot.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So
finish briefing the plate, because now we're turning inbound again. I'd like to unsuspend it and let it finish following the approach procedure.
Okay. So we know we're looking at the correct plate. The date is good.
For the sake of time, I've trimmed out the details of the plate briefing.
The airplane, if you put it into, once we're inbound and we unsuspend it, we're going to put it into approach mode, and it's going to follow vertically. All you're going to have to do is control power and add flaps.
Very cool.
Romeo Foxtrot Whiskey Tower simulated on nav runway 06 approach approved. Maintain VFR at all times. Report DAXAT.
Okay, we'll call you DAXAT, Romeo Fox Whiskey.
So approach now.
Unsuspend and approach.
So what would happen if I pressed approach first?
Nothing.
Okay.
It's just...
Yep. All right. So now, is it no to begin to descend yet, or?
Well, it won't, because as I said, where does 3,000 feet intercept our profile?
So 7 miles back. So
7 miles back. If you were at a higher altitude, it would know at which point. The only thing you don't want to be is at an altitude above the profile, because it's not going to, the autopilot's not going to drive itself down unless you put a VNAV profile in, which is already starting to push.
Yeah.
What I know. I'm still getting used to that, but I know this will work.
Yeah.
This I've tried. I just want people not to think that buying the latest and greatest is going to solve a bunch of problems or make them a better or safer IFR pilot, because in some cases automation is less safe if you don't know how to use it, or you have mode confusion, you don't know why the thing's doing what it does. You really need to make sure that you safely train for it. Get somebody that knows what they're doing to show you how to use it, and use it progressively. Use it in steps. Make it do the most basic things first. And if you go back to the default nav page, which is where I typically, there's no point in having two maps running. I'm usually in this page here with the 650 because I got the map down there. Plus you have a map here, right? And all the situational awareness.
Yeah.
Don't have anything duplicating.
Right.
Something. Have everything doing a little bit of everything. One thing just to kind of preload your brain for, and that's that when it starts to descend, the autopilot's going to push the nose down.
You need to pull the power back.
You need to pull the power back and add a little bit of flap as well. And it's almost a simultaneous pull some power, because that causes the nose to drop. If you cause the nose to drop by pulling power before the autopilot is starting to follow the glide path down, the trim of the autopilot will start trying to hold the nose up. If you deploy flaps in a high-wing airplane, it tries to push the nose up and the trim tries to roll the nose down. So right at the point where you can see that it's about to start following the glide path down, pull the power back from about 21 back to, I'd say, about 18 inches, and immediately punch in 10 degrees of flaps. And that combination just makes the airplane sort of naturally do what it's going to do anyways. Whereas if you, like you were asking earlier, whether it matters if you hit approach first and then unsuspend, no it doesn't. But in this case, if you do stuff out of sequence, it gets a little wonky. There we go, left is 058, now we should start the turn. Tower, Romeo Fox Whiskey is turning DAXAT inbound.
Romeo Foxtrot Whiskey Tower, what are your intentions after this approach?
We'll continue straight out, and then we'll self-navigate back to Burlington.
Romeo Foxtrot Whiskey Tower, right.
So you see the course pointer is automatically lined up on the inbound course. It's giving you the distance to the next waypoint right there, 4.6 miles.
Yep.
Just like here, 4.6 miles. And you see now you got a little pink diamond has appeared. That's your glide path. When that gets close to the middle, that's our interception of the glide path. That's when you're going to pull the power and add a bit of flap. We can do our pre-landing checks at this point. So primer, master, mags.
Seals on both.
Mixture's coming up rich. Prop we're going to leave for the time being. All right, so there she comes. And you can see now it's intercepting glide path. Pull the power back a good 3 inches. And add 10 degrees of flaps right away. There you go. And look at this thing, it's like it's on rails. Right?
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Like nothing perturbs this if you do stuff in a nice sort of an organized sequence. As soon as you're inside the white arc, you can give it 20. I would never use full flaps until I have the runway in sight.
I haven't touched the trim yet, but is autopilot doing that?
Autopilot is doing everything. You don't notice it, but you can see the trim wheel subtly moving up and down.
That is cool, I'm gonna shot of that.
So yeah, it's retrimming. There you are. Now you're in the white arc. Give yourself another 10 degrees of flaps. So we're now VIPCA final. This is our distance to the end of the runway. So remember, in the mist, it's power, pitch, toga, positive rate, flaps up.
Then we can unsuspend.
Yeah, and we'll reset the runway heading here just by pushing the heading button, just to give us a bit more of a visual guide. So 1200 for 1160, you said?
1121.
1120, sorry. So there's 1120 right there. If the runway's not in sight, you would level out.
Okay, so I need to disable the autopilot.
Disable the autopilot, full power, and hit toga, and just nest the flight director bars. Okay, you have positive rate, flaps coming up.
So I'm just going to follow this
up. This is arriving at waypoint.
Huh?
So now it's going to ask you if you want to unsuspend in a second. The answer will be yes. Okay, so activate GPS missed approach and hit nav.
And now I can let go, right? Autopilot's doing its thing.
Oh, sorry, turn the autopilot on.
This one?
Yeah, the flight director's doing its thing, but the autopilot's not doing anything.
Do we like this? It's turning us. Okay,
yeah, because we drifted off. There's quite a bit of a wind down there. Romeo Fox Whiskey's in the mist.
All right, and now
Romeo Fox Whiskey Tower, report leaving the zone.
Romeo Fox Whiskey. So it's maintaining toga pitch setting here, right?
That's how I was going to ask, how does it know what I want to climb at?
Yeah, in this case, it's just going to the flight director bars, right? It's in go around, see?
Okay.
And Alts is preset to 2400, so it'll only go to 2400. The problem now is it's going to go to Muxing and hold.
Right.
And we don't want it to do that.
No.
We want to go back to Burlington. So hit back, flight plan.
Then we inverted the flight plan and set up the approach to head back home, but it took about a minute, so I trimmed that down.
And we're going to do the approach, so even now you can basically hit approach instead of navigate. It's not going to do anything.
We're going to pretend we're clear to the approach?
Yes.
But that's the idea, you don't press that button until you've got it?
In theory. I mean, it would still navigate. The only difference is by pushing approach is it'll follow the vertical profile too. Otherwise, it's just going to navigate right to Burlington at this altitude.
Right, okay.
It'll stay at 2400.
Right. And then we need to remember to call traffic when we're at the fix and when we're 3 mile final, right?
Correct.
So those are the two. So it's call when you're 5 minutes away.
5 minutes prior to commencing the approach.
At the fix.
At the fix, or at the point where you intercept the final approach course.
Oh.
3 mile final, or at the final approach fix, whichever is less, or thereabouts. It's not an exact thing. It's a heads up to other people, right? So are you giving them good information? In this case, VFR pilots don't know where Boxan is. So I'm going to call Burlington traffic, Romeo Fox Whiskey's over the shoreline on an 8 mile final for runway 32 Burlington, expecting the field in about 5 minutes.
And then you legally have to make the 3 mile final call.
Well, again, if you're IFR, right? We're VFR, so that kind of IFR rule book's not out the window, but it's in the back seat.
I'm just trying to, for the flight,
for the flight test, yes.
That's yeah. I can't, you know what I mean? I can't wait to be out of that world so then we can have that conversation of like, what do we really do?
Well, even on the flight test though, they're seeing.
But I'm under the hood, right? I'm pretending I'm IFR. That's where it's always so confusing.
Right. Yeah, and they want you to say, you know, things like, if this was real IFR conditions, I would make this call.
Right.
But if this was VFR conditions, like let's say we just popped out of a cloud base right now on approach.
I could cancel.
You could cancel and you could proceed in VFR. And then,
but is that a good decision?
If you see the runway and there's no chance that you're going to lose sight of it because a cloud's going to move in your way or a rain shower is going to move in your way, cancel. Get out of the system. Get out of their hair. Give yourself more freedom. Right?
And then if you did have to overshoot for whatever reason, is that a pretty big pain in the ass to get a pop-up clearance again? Because you're like out?
That you wouldn't necessarily want to do. And that's why I say you need to ensure that there's absolutely no chance that you're going to lose sight of the field.
Okay.
So next desired track 321, which is the same track as we're on. 0.1 to go. So we're crossing Victo, should be at 1590. It looks like it corresponded perfectly. Our next waypoint is runway 32. We're now 2.9 back.
This is the call.
Burn traffic, Romeo Fox Whiskey's on a 3-mile final, runway 32, full stop. But we also want to see that when we get to 1,100 feet, we should be 1.5 miles back, and that's when we would look up, and that's when you could shut the autopilot off, you could add more flap, you're going to manually land the airplane.
India final, runway 32,
You can't use the autopilot down to a minimum of 200 feet.
That's the legal?
That's the legal limit. If the runway is visible at 500 feet, you want to leave the autopilot on, leave it on. But legally, you cannot use an autopilot below 200 unless you're doing a Cat 3 approach. But like, rock solid,
minimums.
Eh? There's a minimum, so
kick off the autopilot and
if you want, or leave it on until 200 AGL.
Okay, I want to get a feel for the airplane though.
Okay, well, kick her off.
Okay.
Add more flaps if you like. This has a stall kit on it. You could hold this thing off. Try and hold it off as long as you can.
So all the flaps now?
All the flaps.
So it still feels like it's on rails, but it's
just because it's a 182.
gonna be heavy on the flare.
Yeah,
so
use trim as you're rounding it out. But because it was all set up nice and stable, you're not changing much, are you?
Oh, that's good. I just got it a little slower just so I wouldn't have to spend all kinds of time bleeding it off.
Yeah.
Berlin traffic, Xperia India, clear of runway 32.
Nice.
Yeah, that's nice. Really didn't have much work to do there.
No.
So if you're still here, I appreciate you sticking around to the end. It was a difficult edit and I worked really hard to trim this one despite the fact that it's long. It's actually a pretty tight edit. I sent the rough cut to Patreon supporters to see what they thought, and the overwhelming consensus there was to keep it running long. So that's what we did. And I want to thank them and sponsors for helping create this content. And until next time, keep your flight chops sharp.
So it's weird to see a autopilot flight where it's just like...
And all the lines are straight, eh?